Hi everyone, a couple of quick housekeeping points before you jump into Sandy's podcast. Just wanted to mention Mental Fitness Mondays, something I'm doing alongside these podcasts. It's pretty obvious what it is. It's talking about mental fitness, and it's going to be on Mondays. Trying to charge the week up. I'm doing it with a good friend of mine, Rory Berry, who is also a podcast guest back in the day. And he's a coach, and he's also a lot of fun. So we're going to try and have some fun and try and throw some positivity out into the world and charge your week. It would be great to have you there, great to have some audience members there. We're live streaming it, which is terrifying, to be quite honest, but it's an adventure for me and a challenge for me and for Rory. And so we're doing that every Monday until Christmas time at 9 p.m. Central European time, 8 p.m. UK time, whatever that works out all around the world. It's going to be maximum half an hour, and we're hopefully going to get some live guests in to discuss. There's topics each week around mental fitness, so related to mental fitness. You can check out the website. I've got a new website for WinBuilding, so winbuilding.com. You can check it out there about the podcast and all the podcast episodes, but also there's a page for Mental Fitness Mondays on there, so you can see what we're going to have coming up. Okay, that was as quick as I could make it. Enjoy the podcast.
Hi, you're listening to WinBuilding, hosted by me, Nick Ray.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm very, very happy today because I've got a good friend of mine from London days, I guess, but she's not from London originally. Spent a long time in London though. Sandy Kusano. We actually worked very closely together. I had Sandy in my team. She was an absolute rock star. A classic case of hire someone better than you. She's way, way better than me. It was a great move on my part to get her leading the team, which then got me to move on to other things. So that's how I got to know Sandy, really. She's also great friends with my wife, Louisa, and unfortunately, she now lives in a completely different part of the world than us. So this is our moment to catch up, I guess, but I'm going to let her introduce herself. So, Sandy, if I can pass over to you, just give us an outline of sort of who you are, where you come from, how your career's progressed, and what's got you to where you are today.
Thanks, Nick, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And hello to everyone. My name is Sandy Kusano. I, as Nick mentioned, most recently lived in London, but my journey started when I was born in Japan, in the suburbs of Japan, and to a Japanese father and a Korean mother, and then lived in Korea for a while, and then we immigrated to the U.S., to California, when I was about 4. And so my American journey began, my American life. So as a first generation American, growing up in California, went to school in Boston, and really found ways to design my career. I started off in hospitality as a waitress, and then catapulted into a career in sales at EF, where I met Nick. And so working in educational sales and global travel, which became a huge passion of mine. It probably started before that when I traveled internationally on my own. But being able to do that for 12 years and work through sales, operations, marketing, IT, all of those wonderful things. I then left EF for another role as a managing director of a travel company, another student travel company. And then about 2 years ago, I resigned. I made a decision that I wanted to trade in my dream job for a dream life. And so I took a pause and I reevaluated myself and what was important and how I wanted to live out kind of these next years of my life and what was important to me. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 2 years. And I'm landing now in a space where I'm a human potential coach. My life's passion is to amplify voices of women and girls around the globe and focus on the mental health specifically of the Asian community. So that's what I do now. And I'm loving every minute of it. And I'm just really thankful to be here. So that's me.
That is awesome. I'm so happy to hear. I love that, trade in dream job for dream life. That's a great quote. That's probably, I don't know yet, but that's possibly going to be the tagline of this. Unless you give me some more gold, then I'll have to decide. But I'd say you are really someone who, for me, I mean, I know lots and lots of people who kind of love travel and would put that on their CV and, you know, passionate about travel. And I've certainly been one of those people myself, actually. I mean, I've enjoyed traveling the world and I've been very lucky to travel lots of places. But you took it pretty seriously, man. You're someone who I think is really, really passionate about travel. So if we could talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's for me, but a big part of who you are is sort of seeing you jetting off to all these different places. Obviously not in the last year or two, but but at pre-corona times. So talk to me a little bit about that and about that passion.
Yeah, fair enough. I think some of my earliest memories have been airports and hotels. I've always had this weird love of airports and hotels. I just like the ambiance and environments. I love sitting on airplanes. And some of my earliest memories, I'll tell you, is I guess I've always been moving around in different environments. And my mom, this quote always hits me. What she would say to me, we were traveling somewhere in, I think, Korea or Germany. I can't even remember. I was so young, but she basically we'd always get on public buses. It must have been Germany. And she said to me, you know, the best way to understand people and where they live is to see it through their lens. And so we wouldn't really go on taxis and stuff. We'd go on buses. And so that was always just this keystone component of why I travel and how I do. So I will admit, like, there's a part of me that loves resorts and the glam and girls' vacations and all of that. Like, I'm human and I love that. But there is this other pivotal part of me that really values travel as my classroom. I was never this ace student, despite what people think of me and the perception. I really struggled with the studying, and I'm not a very book smart person, but where I have evolved as a person in my understanding of life is through travel. When I observe other people, you know, people watching, how they interact, the differences and the similarities in different cultures, despite what you would think, you know. And so for me, I think that's where I've really come to value travel for me as I expand as a human, is that it is my classroom. It is how I learn how I show up in the world. Right. So I think that is.
I love that. Yeah, I love the seeing through lenses as well. I think it's totally right. And also, I don't know about you, but when I travel, I feel like if I get to explore somewhere, the more you do that, you know, the more you realize how little you've seen. Right. So everywhere you go to, until you live somewhere and really, really, you know, explore that specific area. But even then, you only see usually when you're living, you're also working, and then you're kind of in this work life, which is again different. But yeah, seeing it through the lens, I love that. That's really cool. So Sandy, let's get on to it, because you're a human potential coach now, and I want you to talk about that. And I also want you to promote yourself a little bit, because I know you're launching a podcast soon, and we've got plenty of things to talk about on that front. But human potential coach, so let's talk about that, because I've had a few coaches on, and I've done coaching myself, and I think there's some really interesting tie-ins to this whole win building. Well, I mean, a lot of win building is about coaching, about goal setting and achieving goals. So talk to me a bit about your philosophy around winning or achieving great things.
Wow, what a great question. Yeah, so, you know, I just want to take a step back and just explain that, you know, when I got into coaching, it was a personal journey and choice for me. It was in 2020, aptly, and yeah, right? A lot of introspective time. And I decided, actually, I was still at a point where I had left the dream job, but didn't know what the dream life actually looked like for me.
Okay.
And so I decided that I wanted to train as a coach more for the personal introspective journey. I thought it could help me. And I don't know why I thought I could have just hired a coach, but instead I was like, no, I'll train to be one. I'll get like the inside scoop of it. Right. And so that was my initial process, what happened then after was that I found this natural ability or inclination and a passion for it. And I saw the need, because then when I decided that I wanted to actually get a coach for myself and I looked out in the landscape, I actually saw not as many faces that looked like mine as I should have. And I thought that that was relevant, right? As an Asian woman who comes from an immigrant background and has very often sat in a boardroom where she is not only the only female, but the only woman of color as well. I realized that so much of my career in how I perceived winning and perceived success was kind of skewed because of that. And because I didn't have someone that could coach me and see things in a different light and really help me shine through my own self-worth. So I felt like I could make a difference here by helping people, basically helping myself, because that's what a lot of coaches tend to do as well, right? And so that, coupled with the fact that I've had a pretty significant career, I feel like, where I've had gone through so many dynamics of what it's like to work in workspaces, in teams, in startup environments, in chaos, operations, all of these things. So I felt like that is where I could help people find the clarity in the chaos. And I have come to work specifically with founders and entrepreneurs and creatives, people that kind of don't have all the guardrails, I guess, of society and corporate life and all of that. And often people are transitioning from corporate or company life into something where they're building it on their own. And it can get really difficult, right? Because suddenly you're out there on your own. You're your own boss. You have to manage yourself. You are suffering. All of us will suffer from self-sabotage and all those thoughts, imposter syndrome, all of those things. And so the beauty of it, I feel, with coaching is that you don't actually need it to succeed, right? But what coaching does, from my lens, is that it helps to accelerate your progress, and it helps to have someone co-create your journey and you design your life and see all the blind spots. I think that's what coaches tend to do, right? Yeah, you can be introspective for yourself, but you can only see yourself from so many angles and degrees, right? There's certain parts of you that you just don't always see, right? Unless, and so that you're not always looking at yourself in the mirror. You very rarely are, unless you choose so. So I think that that's where I love the opportunity to come in as a coach and serve as the mirror for someone and reflect back and show them a reconnection to who they are. I don't think people are lost. I don't think people are broken. I think they have everything they need, their answers, all their resources within them. It's just a matter of reconnecting to it and finding it. And so that's what I love about coaching, and that's my approach. And I use a lot of brain-body science as well, where we start to actually retrain your brain so that you lessen the habit of self-sabotage and create new neural pathways to really connect to the part of your brain that makes sense, your prefrontal cortex, so that where you actually problem solve and create, and versus your survival brain, where you go into fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah. Okay. So talk me through a bit more about that then. So I think, because that is somewhere where, I mean, I've read a bit about it, but in my coaching experience, it was very much more just sort of the formula about exactly what you were saying about kind of being a sounding board and a mirror and bouncing, like having I see it as a guided conversation with yourself. Like that's often how I've described coaching. But let's talk a bit more about the brain science as well, because you sound like you know a bit more about that than I do, and I'm quite interested in that too. So tell me a bit more about that. What have you learned on your journey on that front, and what are the things to really look out for in the coaching sphere?
Yes. Well, this became intriguing to me because I found it from a personal journey that I was always questioning, why do I always do these things, right? Even though I know better. I've gone to seminars, I go to workshops, I read books, I read I see the documentaries, and I understand it intellectually, and yet actively I don't react. And I would always joke, like, I'm this procrastinating perfectionist, right? And I had these waves of, like, I would work really hard. I would work like literally 24 hours on certain things when I was really passionate for it, or, you know, and in flow. But then there'd be other things where I'd just be like, I would procrastinate, and I could never understand why. I would never really understand. I would always think it's a time management thing, or the lazy thing, or all these like mental hurdles. And no matter what I read or saw, like, I would be like, aha, but then it would never change, right? Just never change. And so, and I'm sure, you know, your audience people, if that sounds familiar, like, here was the difference, is that we are hardwired to our survival brain, right? And it begins as we are children. And so you start to absorb information, and you start to learn that, you know, to react these ways. And we all come with natural strengths, right? Regardless, when we come into the world. But when those become threatened, or you have to protect yourself, you start to learn these behaviors to protect yourself. For example, for me, I came into the world with a natural sense of ease and flow. I like to just be chill, you know, and I've always heard, like, from my family, I'm like, oh, I was always the baby. Like, I never really cried. The phrases used to describe me as a kid is like, you wouldn't even know she was there. Like, I could sit in a corner and like play, and like people would forget that I was there. I was that quiet. And it never bothered me. I loved just being in my head and in my imagination and all those things. Great. Except for what then manifests later on as I continue to do that is that anytime my ease and flow got disrupted, I would start to avoid those types of situations, which means I avoided difficult conversations. I avoided confrontation. I avoided feeling bad, right? So doing the things, avoiding things that scare you, avoiding things that, and then uncoupled with that, I would also, I'm an achiever. So I do like winning. I like attaining goals, right? And so I also learned that, so I became a hyper achiever. So I went from achiever to hyper achiever. I started learning that, like, if you worked really hard and had great outcomes, then you got rewards, that dopamine hit, right? So my self-worth got caught on to that. And so that was my survival when I was a kid. When we first came to the US, I didn't speak English because obviously we had come from Korea. I was 4 years old, so I could barely speak anyway, right? So limited vocabulary, go to daycare or preschool, and I get teased because I can't speak English, right? And so even without understanding the words, I understood that I was not accepted, and I would come home and cry, right? And so from there, I started learning, like, assimilate and avoid those types of feelings. And it started from a very early age. So all of those things. Now, it all works, right? We need that survival part of our brain. We are here because our ancestors saw a leaf shaking and was like, oh, something could eat me, and they ran away, right? That's why we're here. They survived. All those little nuances. So those are important. But here we are in this world where very rarely are we in a jungle, or is there a tiger behind a bush? And so, but our body doesn't know the difference. So when your boss is yelling at you, or when you're being bullied, your body still reacts in the same way. And we don't learn to unlearn that in situations that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, right? So what we should be taught in school, right around 16, 17, 18, as we graduate into adult world life, as long as you're not like living in a jungle, but like in our everyday normal lives, or just going into college and work and all of that, is we should start to learn that some of those things we don't need anymore for survival, and start to really develop the connections to our prefrontal cortex, right? And kind of weaken the survival instincts, right? So every time something happens that you feel threatened, you don't have to go into this freeze mode or flight mode or whatever your tendency is, but instead find ways to stop. Basically, it's so simple in some ways of the operating system is that you need to be in awareness that it's happening to you. Allow the moment to pass, whether through intense focus on like a physical sensation, almost like rubbing the fingertips of your two fingers, just like something like that. And then, because it only takes us 90 seconds to process an emotion, right?
Yeah.
Anything that happens after that is just your head turning and burning and like putting it on repeat. And actually, the greatest damage we do to ourselves is that we experience stress or anger or fear or all those things. Totally normal, perfectly fine. The damage comes is that we replay it over and over and over again. And that's when you start to damage and overuse that muscle, because you continuously give your brain a mental model to go into that mode. And your body consistently is shooting out cortisol every time you have that thought, because it can't tell the difference between the actual happening and your replay in your head. You know,
and then we let it affect our behavior, right? Like what you're describing as a kid, you know, then your behavior gets affected, and then the way people react to you mirrors that sometimes, and only serves to exacerbate it. I actually, you reminded me, and I didn't realize it was what was happening, I guess, but I used to train in customer service, and one of the things I used to have as a sort of motto was bring your senses to the rescue, you know, like, and it was such a simple thing. It was basically like, learn to recognize when something is happening to you that feels wrong or feels out of control or out of line with how you want to behave normally or how you want to be normally. Learn to recognize that, and then let your senses come to the rescue, because if you can recognize it, then you can do something about it. The problem is, of course, this, you know, everyone uses the expression, the red mist or seeing red and things. In reality, it doesn't need to be a red mist at all. It can be just you're annoyed, you know, you're in a bad mood because you didn't get to the bus on time to get the bus, and then everything snowballed from there, and your whole day fell into pieces. Or you didn't get the deal you were looking to get, or your kid annoyed you because they didn't get dressed in the morning. Classic. Speaking from experience. But then it's being able to recognize when those things are happening and taking control of them. But that's, as you said, it's easy to say. I don't think it's easy to do at all, and hence why coaches can actually be an extremely useful resource for people to use, right? And to learn from.
Yeah, and so I spend a significant amount of time for the clients that do choose the option to actually put them through like a boot camp or a strength training where we do brain exercises for almost 7 weeks straight to like help weaken some of the muscles that you no longer need, and to kind of balance up and strengthen the muscles that you do need. Those neural pathways is basically what we call muscles. And, you know, the other piece of it that I just want to follow up with what you were saying is this word of feeling, right? So we as humans think that we think and use words a lot, but we actually interact with the world mostly through feeling. Majority of it is actually through how we sense the world around us. And so just to layer upon what I was saying about the brain is that in actuality, we have 3 brains. We have a head brain, we have a heart brain, and we do have a gut brain. And they are significant because, you know, your gut is, the main purpose is survival for self. How can I make my life the best for me? And so that gut instinct, that's not just a made up creation. It exists. And the microbiomes in there, the connection to the brain, it's significant. And some of the studies show that most CEOs, entrepreneurs, people that tend to go in that way tend to have a really strong gut brain. It's not, you know, odd. And I've done the assessment. The heart brain, people like me, for example, like coaches or people that kind of have this empathy leaning pattern, how the heart brain is all about bonding with others, survival. How should I act or be so that you like me or want to interact with me? And then your brain is the predictor, it kind of serves as the predict the future for survival and is like the problem solver. How does this work? Is this correct? Should I do this? And so that's another way that's important to like know yourself, especially in this landscape where you're trying to either design your life or, win big or whatever those things are. It's about actually understanding how your body works. Because some of those things that sometimes frustrate you, which I found to be like, why do I keep doing this? As soon as I understood why and the awareness and then created the tools to help myself when I got in those modes, it was a game changer, right? Do I still procrastinate? Yes, but I can catch it faster and then kind of rehabilitate myself back to where I need to be way faster versus the past version of me would just kind of sit around and be like, why do I always do this? And would focus on the what's wrong with me, or like, why am I so lazy, or like, I'm never going to do it. And I would see goals just like sift through, right? Like I would just like be like, oh, well, I guess I'm not doing that anymore, right? Because I just would miss these opportunities because I couldn't get myself back on track, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that was why it was so powerful for me and why I feel so passionate about empowering others to be able to do that, because there is reasoning behind it. You're not crazy and you're not alone in this, And so being able to equip people with the right tools and to help them get over that.
So what sort of tools do you use then? Like, what are the things that you've decided to choose to kind of give yourself benchmarks or help people to understand themselves better?
Yeah, so I am trained through an organization or a science called Positive Intelligence. It was created by a gentleman named Shirzad Shameen. It's actually, I'm in San Francisco right now, and it's one of the reasons why I'm here. And so it's like the synthesis of cognitive, behavioral, and performance psychology. The concepts in it are not anything new, but what is new is that he's created a framework, and we literally call it an operating system. So it's a way to kind of upgrade the way you think in your brain and your body so that, you can evolve into the modern world that we live in. And so some of the things that we do there are just these very simple techniques and exercises to help when you do find that you start to become hijacked by your thoughts, right? And that's a key component is that, I'll give you one example. There's certain avatars or certain personas that we all have in our lives. And the one universal saboteur, let's say, or avatar that shows up for all of us, regardless, is called the judge, right? In his system in the operation is called the judge. And so we all have this tendency to judge ourselves, judge others, and judge circumstances. And that then creates our reactions. And that's kind of what I was saying with the survival brain. You needed it as a kid, right? You needed it as a child, especially when you couldn't articulate in what was threatening you or how it is, that you start to learn, like when a person looks like this, they are friendly, it's safe. When a person acts or sounds like this, they are a threat, right? When I act this way, and you start to judge yourself, like when I act this way, I will, mommy and daddy get mad or disappointed, right? But when I act this way, they get happy. This is how I make friends. You also start to learn, like you do circumstances, right? Like these are situations that I feel comfortable in. These are not. This is when I shine. This is when I not. And so all of those things become a learning curve. But then what happens as we get older is that we start to over exaggerate the intensity of those. And so, you might find that you'll come in and as an adult, like how many times have we done things and then we go, God, you're so stupid. Why do you do that? Right? And we start to really harshly judge ourselves. And it holds us back. I am daring to ask your audience, like, how many times have you had a great idea and talked yourself into it. And before you even told us and a soul, you like talked yourself out of it. You're like,
Yeah.
That's the best idea ever. And then like in 24 hours, it's like, nope, not doing it. You know?
Well, you don't need to ask the audience. You can ask me, and plenty. And as to the cursing at myself for how stupid, basically most days I would say I find myself doing that a lot. So I absolutely hear that frustration of the judgment as well. But in terms of then learning about that, how do you learn to recognize that, and what sort of I mean, I don't want you to give away your whole practice and take you out of business, but no, but what sort of things do you say are kind of key ways in which you would then learn that about yourself and then learn to recognize it?
Sure. I talked about it before. We do I teach my clients these simple exercises, so focusing on physical sensations, doing a lot of work on awareness, so recognizing when you're being hijacked, which is essentially whenever you're in negative emotion, right? Whenever you're in negative emotion, anytime you fear, and you can think of emotion in basically two buckets: fear or love. All of our emotions kind of generate out of the two, right? So fear, anger, rejection, frustration, anxiety, those are all stemmed from fear of, and love, then you go at passion, all those things are stemmed out of love. So whenever you start to just recognize, I am in a negative emotion right now, you recognize that, you give yourself at least 90 seconds, if not 2 minutes, to just recalibrate, basically, based on that physical sensation, right? Just rubbing your hands, just feeling that sensation, focusing a visual sensation, even hearing, listen for the furthest away sound or the sound of your breath. And then one key way to do it is after you do that and you've recentered yourself, you would ask yourself, what's the gift and opportunity in this situation right now?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Another question you might ask yourself is, why, instead of asking yourself, why is this happening to me? Ask yourself, why is this happening for me? So you change the 2 to a 4. You ask why, and not that you'll get an answer right away, like some situations you won't, and it won't happen for a while. But what you're actually doing in that moment is you're allowing yourself to kind of literally unplug from your survival brain into the part of your brain that can think. The irony of it is that when you're in survival mode, you literally shut off your prefrontal cortex and you cannot problem solve. And you cannot think creatively, and you can't get yourself out of the mess. Your body just wants to fight or flight. And so, again, you might have experienced this where you need to come up with a solution and you can't think of anything because you're in survival mode. And so you're not serving yourself.
And I think when you can recognize that it's not like you said about to you and for you, I love that, because it's usually, very rarely is something negative happening to you because it's someone personally trying to hurt you or attack you. Right. Very rarely. And even in toxic relationships, sometimes, psychopaths or whatever are looking to actually cause you harm or do something to you. But even in relationships that are toxic, it's usually about the individuals and their relationship troubles with themselves that's causing the friction and the hurt. It's not necessarily that it's happening to you. It's like it's happening in the world. The way the world is happening around you right now kind of sucks because of the way the world is happening. But it's not to you necessarily. It's not necessarily built on attacking you. And I think that's a great reflection. Actually, I hadn't thought about putting it like that. Changing it to for you is quite powerful, actually, to reframe it, because then it does allow you to then say, okay, this is happening around me. This totally sucks. What can I do about it? Like, what is the option here?
Yeah. And again, the aim isn't to always have the answer to it. It's just to give your brain the opportunity to go to the part of the brain that's actually going to help you. Right?
Yeah.
It's actually going to help you. In relationships, the judge, when you're in honeymoon or lovey-dovey stage, you're typically what we would call in sage mode, or you're in that happy state of mind, right? And so you're in, and that's why it is. What happens as you go on in relationships is that you tend to kind of vortex or spiral down back into your normal centered self, right? With the habits of being very judgmental. And so you'll then start to like see your partner in that judgment light, or, you know, you judge yourself with them, you judge others and all of that. So, and I'll just wrap this part of it up with just one last concept or exercise for yourself and for your audience is this, the reimagining of doing something that you feel like you dropped the ball on before, and to do it in discernment. So here's an example. So they did a study of basketball free throws, right? So this is a performance psychology thing. So they did 3 groups. They put people in 3 groups, and they had the first group go out and they just literally would shoot free throws every day, like physically throw them until they got better, right? The second group never touch the ball, but would like just sit for the same allotment of time and just imagine themselves sinking in their free throws. And then the third group neither touched the ball nor did any reimagining. That was kind of the control. And so then they went and they tested them, like, how did their free throws improve, right? So the group that, you know, practiced for a week or whatever that was, improved by like 28%, right? Their percentage of shots that got into the basket. This is me. I'm not a real sports person. So I'm like, is that what they do? Put the ball in the basket?
Yeah. Get the ball. I'm pretty sure that's basketball.
Yeah.
Sounds right. Sounds good. Go with it.
It's crazy, that correlation.
Yeah, I do know. And yes, you're right.
Thank you. Thank you for the confirmation. I feel better now. But the interesting thing is, so that group improved by 28%. The group that only reimagined themselves being able to do it improved by 25% when they actually started throwing the ball and physically touching it. They created the mental muscle and neural pathway in their brain so that their brain knew what to do when action was needed. And so that's really a powerful way to say, you could revisit something, or you can imagine something over and over again and give your brain the pathway. Like, you know, if you have, this is an extreme example, but, you know, if you're speaking in public, for example, instead of constantly thinking of yourself like getting up on stage and like, you know, losing it and losing control, or, you know, shutting down, you start to slowly just reimagine yourself at ease on the stage or in front of a camera, talking, making eye contact, feeling really good about yourself, feeling your body and all of those things, and being able to do that. And you keep doing that so that your brain, instead of thinking, having the mental model of panic, I'm on a stage, shut down, starts to understand, but actually I can actually be in ease, and I can be in front of a camera and not feel those things. And the more you can give yourself that opportunity and just that practice, you can really start to make a difference in what it feels like when you're actually live action doing something.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I'm kind of intrigued there, because I've used the expression "fake it till you make it" quite a few times, and I know that a lot of people react really negatively to that, right? And I remember Wee Spratby, one of the first podcast guests, he posted something on Insta the other day. I can't remember exactly what the expression was, but it was like, basically, fake it till you make it, it's bullshit. Sort of, you know, like do it. And, but I guess what I was meaning was what you've just described, which is more like, if in your head you can start to convince yourself that you can do things, and that you can find a way through practice of believing in yourself, then you make it. And I think that, you know, I especially think that's true with the public speaking thing. I know a lot of people who are very scared of public speaking. I mean, I think I love public speaking, but I love it because of the adrenaline. So I love the fear attached to it. So I understand the fear as well. But I think it's very interesting to me when you actually do that visualization, or you just practice in smaller groups, and you kind of like, you pretend almost to yourself, I can do this, and then you see people's reaction. You're like, oh, well, that worked. I did do it. You know, I can do it. And so then I use the fake it till you make it, but I know it triggers a lot of people. They're like, no, no, that's bad advice. I don't know where you sit on fake it till you make it, but if you switch it like that, it works, right?
Right. And I think there's, I think the trigger word is the fake it thing, but I do hear what you're saying and what your actual intention of it. So, but yeah, I think that it's how you show up, and it really is about the physiology of like the physicalness of what you're experiencing. And you just mentioned like fear versus excitement. The reality is that your body cannot experiences fear exactly the same as excitement.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's exactly the same. It's actually just your perception of what's happening to you that decides whether it's fear or excitement.
Right.
Right.
It's risk, right? And it's the risk and the way in which the risk is playing out that.
And if excitement, your hands get tingly, your heart starts to palpitate, you might your breath gets shallow. It's fear or it's excitement. And it's literally up to you to choose. Am I scared or am I excited? And so, when you're about to go on stage and you're like, I'm terrified, or you could say, let's see, I'm excited. And your brain will believe you. Your brain will be like, yeah, I'm excited. And the more you do that, you start to train your brain. I'm excited. And you make a choice.
Yeah. I get excited for sure. I know it's excitement,
I know you do.
So I'm good. I'm good.
You're good
I get pretty excited talking about it, for God's sake. I haven't spoken on stage for so long now.
I know.
not that I need to.
Yeah.
Listen, Sandy, I just wanted to kind of start to wrap up, but I also wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a bit more about the podcast that you're going to be launching, if you're allowed to. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it yet, but you told me that you're in pre-production or thinking about a podcast pre-launch, and also whatever you can tell me about the startup adventure that you're thinking about, or if you can tell me about that. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of push forward some of the new things you're doing.
Thank you for the opportunity. My question to you is, am I allowed to swear?
Of course you are. This is a podcast. Apologies to anyone who gets offended by swearing.
Shut your ears right now. So yes, I'm working on launching my podcast called Fuck Up to Glow Up. And I'm celebrating all my massive failures. And because,
I don't think you've had any, but I'm looking forward to hearing about them.
Oh, my friends. Someone asked me, they're like, do you have that many that could fill up a podcast? And I was like, yes, I do, and it's not about like, some of them are small. And it's also to say, it's not like I've lived a life suddenly and I'm like, I'm no longer failing. I'm clearly going to keep failing and do things. And, the thing is,
don't start making failures just to give yourself content. That's not, I don't think that's a good business strategy at all. No.
Like, how can I massively
fuck
this
dear,
up?
you'll never guess what happened to
guess
what happened to me yesterday.
What I have learned, I'm now in phase 4.0, 4.8 of my life right now, is that I've come to accept and actually welcome failure into my life. And part of my passion here is that I want to normalize failure. Normalize failure as part of our success process. Because I think Muhammad Ali said it best, is success is not achieved by winning all the time. Real success comes when we rise after we fall. And I have seen, as I look back in my life, the times that I have grown and kind of leveled up to whatever I wanted next was when I, quote unquote, failed or was down or not basking in success, right? It was when I took risks. It's when I, learned hard lessons. And it's the only reason why I, feel like I'm in a place in my life right now where I can really design my life and do things on my terms and really be bold about it. And so, but I do remember a time when I didn't take risks and I played it safe and I played small. I played really small because the fear of failure was attached. Outcome, we talked about it earlier. The outcome of things that I was doing really was attached to my self-worthiness. Right? So when I would
then you stick with the safe things, right?
Yeah.
That's I think one of the terms that I thought about when you were saying that was comfort zone. I love talking about comfort zone because I think it's such a key element of how we define our lives. If you think about your comfort zone, if you can find a way to get comfortable outside your comfort zone, then you're going to be completely thriving, because at that point there's no limit, right? To what you can do, really. And I think a lot of the things you've described around how to push yourself and how to learn about yourself and control, it's about learning what is uncomfortable and then learning to get out of that and thrive within it or find ways to deal within it. So what you were saying there, I was like, oh yeah, that's totally fits with getting comfortable outside your comfort zone.
Yeah. So I am so comfortable in who I am and how I am. And I've learned that the key to making any real change in your life is to make the choice that you want to make change. And just that you want to make change more than you want the familiar comforts of the stress that you're living right now. Right. So actually staying the same and living in fear is much harder in the long run than taking that leap and taking chances. Right. So, so that's the podcast where I just, massively and vulnerably share my failures. I also am bringing on guests who share, where they are. And, you see,
I was going to say, if you need anyone, if you run out of your own, I'm happy to come on and share some of mine. So I've got a fairly long list, I think, as well, that I can dredge up. I'm not, I need to be, I suppose, slightly careful about my current jobs and things to make sure I don't mess up there. But right. I have quite a few failures in my past that I definitely have learned from. So I think it's, if you need anyone else, I'm happy to come. But I'm sure you'll find people willing to come and share on that.
Thank you. I want future generations to listen to it, or people that whoever needs to hear it, to just understand wherever you are in life, whether you're 20 or 80, is that, feel like this is a sandbox, right? Fall down, scrape a knee. It's okay. You're still going to look back and know that you took the risk and not have any regrets. And I think the most poignant thing is if we're going to talk about goal setting, to just wrap things up, is that, my favorite way of goal setting is, how do I want it to look at the end, right? Like, how do I want to feel? What's that outcome look like? And then kind of build from there and kind of move, build the goal to its basic core from that vision. Do that with your life. What do I want it to look like at my 80th or 100th birthday party? What do I want people to say? Who's going to be there? And what do I want to be able to look back on? And my dream for everyone is that they can look back on their life and know that they've made more memories than they've had dreams.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Dreams are only great, just to inspire, but you don't want to live this lifetime where it's like, oh, I wish I had done that. I have all these dreams unfulfilled. You want to be like, oh man, I did all that stuff. I messed up here. I did that, but I did it.
Yeah,
those
exactly.
Memories. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, funnily enough, tattoos is one for me where people are always like, when I got my first tattoo, they said, oh my God, what is it going to look like what are you going to think when you're 80? And it's all that. I said, I'm going to think, how cool was that I did that fun tattoo when I was 20 something or 30 something, there's a story behind that tattoo and it's followed me my whole life. So, that's what I'm going to think, and that's why I'm doing it. So, not that I promote people to have to get tattoos, but I definitely react to that. What is it going to be like when you're 80? I'm like, it's going to be awesome. Don't worry.
It's going to be a great story. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
And if my saggy tattoo is the only major worry I've got about my body, well, awesome. Even better.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah. Totally.
Listen, Sandy, I thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I do miss you quite a lot, and Louisa misses you as well. We were just reminiscing actually before, because it's quite late, as you can probably tell by the light situation here. It's quite late at night here in Oslo, so I fortunately don't have a light source from this side, but so she's not here to say hello. Is the reason I'm telling you that. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us. It's been ace. I'm going to drop all the links for your various things in the description down below, but also you can follow Sandy on Instagram, right? Is the best one, or what's the best one now?
TikTok and Instagram, yeah.
TikTok? Oh my God, who's on TikTok? Oh,
I know.
Way too old for TikTok.
Couple billion people.
Okay, TikTok and Instagram. I'll drop those links.
No more
there.
limiting thoughts.
You can expect to see me on TikTok sometime. Okay, thank you so much, Sandy. Did you have anything you wanted to, like, last words of wisdom? Anything else you wanted to put out there before we close out?
Yeah, one thing. If you give change a chance, then you give yourself a chance to change. So thank you for having me. And yeah, I've enjoyed this story.
Love it.
Thanks.
Love it. Perfect. Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed meeting Sandy. She is amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I love the way she approaches the world. So yeah, I hope you took as much from that as I did. Thank you again, Sandy, if you're listening this far in the episode. A quick reminder to those of you who are still with me, Mental Fitness Mondays, every Monday. Come join in. It's on LinkedIn. It's live streaming, 9 p.m. Central European Time, 8 p.m. UK time. Check out the episode lists. If you're not connected to me on LinkedIn, get on that. Connect to me on LinkedIn, then we can engage. All right. Thanks a lot for listening. See you in the next episode.